Had Russia submitted to the US attempted nuclear blackmail, Washington would have immediately set its sights on China, after which it would have restored its declining unipolar hegemony over the planet if it subsequently succeeded in strategically neutralizing that country too. It's warned earlier that Kiev must withdraw from Donetsk, Lugansk if it truly wants to avert war, pointing out that Moscow will decisively support its newfound Donbass allies with military means in order to ensure the security of their civilian populations if Ukraine kept up its unprovoked genocidal offensive against them. Regrettably, the US failed to rein in its Eastern European proxy army, which prompted Russia to commence its ongoing special operation in Ukraine. Russian ambassador to the UN Vasily Nebenzia articulated the reasons behind President Putin's decision, accusing the US-led West of exploiting the Donbass people as a bargaining chip in the geopolitical game that seeks to weaken Russia and bring NATO closer to our borders. He slammed their double standard towards the same humanitarian rights that they hitherto claimed to hold sacred, albeit only whenever saying such advances their own geostrategic objectives. Kiev's continued refusal to implement the UNSC-backed Minsk Accords directly provoked Moscow's decisive intervention into the rest of Ukraine that Russia still recognizes as falling with that government's writ. To be exact, the Kremlin actually believes that the Ukrainian government doesn't even exercise practical sovereignty anymore upon being taken over by the US after 2014's coup that followed the months-long spree of urban terrorism popularly known as Euromaidan. Semantics aside, the ongoing operation is aimed at forcing the US-backed Ukrainian post-coup authorities to return to their pre-regime change peaceful policies towards their own people, Russia, and the rest of the region. President Putin's address to the nation Thursday morning stated his country's goals as ensuring the country's demilitarization, denazification, and to bring to justice those who carried out crime against civilians, including against Russian citizens. The larger context in which this is occurring is the undeclared US-provoked missile crisis in Europe that was initiated by Washington's desire to neutralize Moscow's nuclear second strike capabilities so as to perpetually place it in a position of nuclear blackmail. President Putin earlier elaborated on these very credible concerns during his 21st of December expanded meeting of the Defense Ministry Board as well as the 21st of February's Security Council meeting and subsequent address to the nation later that evening. The end goal is to revise the European security architecture through military means in the absence of the US-led West's failure to respect Russia's security guarantee requests so as to make it more amenable to Moscow's national security interests. This is in accordance with the OSIS principle of indivisible security that's been violated over the decades by NATO's eastward expansion at its expense. That's the only outcome that can restore the strategic security stability that the US undermined. Sergei Karaganov, honorary chairman of Russia's highly influential Council on Foreign and Defense Policy, published a very detailed analytical piece at RT titled Russia's New Foreign Policy, The Putin Doctrine. All interested readers are very strongly encouraged to read it in full since it's akin to Russia's 21st century version of Kennan's long telegram in the sense that it meticulously describes Moscow's intended means for sustainably containing US-led threats to its national security. Observers should remember that it didn't have to come to this but that Russia literally had no choice lest it eventually end up blackmailed by the US through nuclear means. President Putin hinted at this in his cited event from 21 December when he admitted that what they are doing, or trying or planning to do in Ukraine, is not happening thousands of kilometers away from our national border. It is on the doorstep of our house. They must understand that we simply have nowhere further to retreat to. With nowhere further to retreat and the US refusing to resort to the diplomatic means proposed by Russia for resolving that missile crisis that America itself initiated, it was obvious in hindsight that Moscow would be compelled to act through the same military technical means that it vaguely warned about earlier in order to ensure the integrity of its national security. Red lines. This fact confirms the legitimacy of President Putin's reference to Article 51 of the UN Charter for justifying his operation. Those who truly support the inherent democratic right of all states to govern and develop themselves according to however their internationally recognized leaders deem fit, as well as to defensively ensure their national security in the face of unprovoked foreign threats, should therefore support Russia's special operation in Ukraine. Moscow's aims aren't to further destabilize the world but to finally restore stability to it after Washington unilaterally undermined the strategic state of affairs. The Eurasian great power is employing its international legal right to self-defense, not only in protection of its own national security, red lines and the humanitarian interests of the Donbass people, but also for the sake of the entire world. Had Russia submitted to the US attempted nuclear blackmail, Washington would have immediately set its sights on China, after which it would have restored its declining unipolar hegemony over the planet if it subsequently succeeded in strategically neutralizing that country too. For these reasons, Russia's cause is just and fully in line with the spirit of the UN Charter that officially decrees the equality of nations and the inadmissibility of one such as the US allegedly ensuring its own security at anyone else's expense like Russia's, and China's for that matter too. Moscow isn't a so-called revisionist power, Washington is, as all that Russia wants to do is return to the international order enshrined by the UN and earlier agreed to by the US itself at that time as well. It was solely the US globally destabilizing pursuit of unipolar hegemony following the USSR's dissolution at the end of the old Cold War that resulted in everything reaching the dire point that it's presently at. America is therefore unquestionably the truly revisionist power that it's deceitfully attempted to gaslight the world into thinking that Russia is through its global network of perception managers. The impending success of Russia's special operation in Ukraine will therefore restore stability to the world.